Mr. Pig.
Hello, boys and girls, moms and dads, and all my friends out there in the barnyard. Is everyone ready for a really good... Okay, is everyone ready? Welcome, everyone. Did everyone have a good summer? I hear all the kids are going back to school. That's great. Work hard and get good grades. Ooh. Why, hello, Mrs. Mathews. It's nice to see you.
Well, thank you.
Why are you wearing that outfit?
Because I'm a suffragette.
Wow, I don't know what a suffragette is.
Well, I'll tell you what a suffragette is. A suffragette was a woman that fought for women's rights over 100 years ago. And this year, 2020, it's the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in our nation.
Do you mean women were not allowed to vote before that?
Well, not only that, they were not allowed to vote. They could not have certain jobs, like being a doctor or a lawyer. They could not purchase a house, and you know what? They couldn't wear pants.
Oh, that's awful!
Oh, no, but these brave women, they were so important for our lives today. Without their influence, women today would not enjoy the equality and freedom they have today.
That's amazing!
Would you like to hear a story about a suffragette?
That would be great!
You're off? Okay. Good morning, boys and girls. I have a favorite book to read to you today from the Alma Public Library. It's a story about Miss Paul and the President Wilson. It's his campaign for the women's right to vote. The title page says, Miss Paul and the President, the creative campaign for women's rights to vote. The author is Dean Robbins, and the illustrator is Nancy Zhang. It's published by the New York Press in New York City. The first page shows us Alice Paul in a purple hat. Alice Paul hurried up and down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. with her purple hat. She wanted to make everything perfect for her parade. A parade that no one in Washington, D.C. would ever forget. Alice double-checked the 26 floats, 10 bands, and a dozen of dancers. Mr. President, we need your support. She took her place with 8,000 other women that wore colorful sashes and carried brightly painted signs. Let women vote in the 1914 election. Well, a mile away, Woodrow Wilson was on a train coming into Washington, D.C., the new president of the United States. He had to adjust his spectacles, but his daughter sat beside him and she straightened his hat. And thousands of people will be here to meet you, she said. You must look your best. And there he is, with a black hat and his hands held up with his spectacles on it. Who was the determined young woman in the purple hat? Oh, where is she? Alice Paul. You know, she grew up on a farm. She liked to make mischief alongside the boys in her town. Sometimes she snuck candy, and other times she chased chickens. But she liked to throw mud balls, too. Every 2 years, Alice watched her father go off to vote, but her mother had to stay home. Why should it be that way? Alice read about her country's laws, and she read the Constitution that promised that people could elect their own leaders. But it also said that only men could vote. Weren't women's vote too? Shouldn't they be able to vote as citizens of the United States of America? President Wilson, he wanted to see the women who had caused all that hullabaloo at the parade. He thought she might apologize to him. After all, she had stolen the spotlight on his first day of inauguration in Washington, D.C. And you know what? Alice, she didn't apologize. She sat down in the president's office and she looked him right in the eye. Mr. President, will you support the vote for women? She asked. Well, the president, he did not expect so bold a question from Alice, this small woman in this purple hat. Miss Paul, the time is not right. I have many important problems to worry about. All right, let's turn the page. President Wilson, he got to work on his problems, and Alice got to work too. She opened an office in Washington, D.C. for the group called the National Women's Party, and thousands of women joined. They called Alice their dear little leader. And that dear little leader wanted to show President Wilson that women's rights were important, just as important as anything else in the United States. And she's going to do it by making mischief, just as she had on the farm. Margaret Wilson, the president's daughter, she's at the White House, and she's looking out the window. Father, Father, come look. There's Alice with a fleet of fancy cars driving down Pennsylvania Avenue. Women honked their horns and they waved yellow flags. Support the vote for women. And congressmen, they came out of their office at the Capitol, and look at that long furled piece of paper that stood on the marble steps. A funny-looking train chugged along the East Coast to the West Coast. Alice had named it the Suffrage Special, and the train stopped in towns all along the way, and families came and looked at and gawked at it. Women made speeches from the caboose, and they sent a letter to President telling him to support women's rights to vote. Well, President Wilson got lots of bags of letters from all around the country. They piled up in the ceiling in his office. But the president, he had other problems to worry about. He didn't take time to read the letters about women's suffrage. Guess who did? Margaret, his daughter, read the letters. That winter, Margaret sat next to her father in the president's car, and a strange sight greeted them at the White House gate. Women walked back and forth carrying signs. President Wilson spotted Alice with the purple hat at the front of the group, and she looked him right in the eye. The president, he glanced down, kind of in his newspaper, but Margaret, she waved at Alice through the window. Let women vote. Let women vote in the 1920 election. So Alice and her friends paced up and down in front of the White House day after day in the freezing cold. People lined the sidewalks to see the hullabaloo. Some of them jeered. Some of them cheered. They brought scarves and mittens to keep the women warm. But the police showed up, and they ordered Alice to leave the White House grounds. Not until the president supports women's right to vote, she declared. Well, the police put the women in handcuffs and they took them off to jail, just as Alice hoped they would. President Wilson, he didn't like the thought of Alice being in jail. He knew that she loved the United States, but why else would she go to all this trouble to vote in her country's elections? Well, maybe women's suffrage is more important than I thought. And Margaret, she looked her father right in the eye, just the way Alice Paul had. Yes, Margaret said. Yes to the women for voting, she said. So Alice stood with others by the National Women's Party, and she wondered what the president would say. Well, President Wilson, he had to adjust his spectacles again, and Margaret straightened his tie, and the people all over the country will read about your speech, she said. You should look your best. The president, he faced the crowd, and he said, "The time is right. I will ask Congress to pass the law giving all women the right to vote." And the women, they waved their handkerchiefs and they threw yellow flowers. 3 cheers for President Wilson, they shouted, and 3 cheers for Alice Paul. Look at all those sunflowers that they're throwing in and the yellow handkerchiefs in the air. So 2 years later, Alice skipped down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. to vote in the 1920 elections, 100 years ago. She filled out her ballot and she raised her arm in victory. A very good story about a woman in the National Women's Party. She had a lot of work to do to convince President Woodrow Wilson to support women's rights to vote in 1918. But it changed the Constitution of the United States because the women's right to vote became the 19th Amendment. And the women, they held meetings with many, many congressmen and the president to help make speeches in favor of women's votes. Wasn't that a good book? I think you would like to find that at the Alma Public Library. Come and check it out.
That was a great story. Thank you for reading it to me.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And thank you very much for having me today.
Well, it's time for us to go. Would you like to hear our goodbye song?
Oh, I'd love to hear a goodbye song.
Oh, it's time to say goodbye to all our friends. Oh, it's time to say goodbye to all our friends. Oh, it's time to say goodbye. Make us smile, wink your eye. Oh, it's time to say goodbye to all our friends.